Hello, welcome to the May 2nd, 2025 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. For those that haven't attended a live stream before, how it works is you could just simply ask questions live in the chat field, or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in kind of a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed, but we will go through all the questions as asked chronologically. If you don't see an immediate response to your question, what you could do is just wait, and we will go through them in order. So if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be, if we could avoid that, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, so if it's 12, 13, or 14, and the operating system, that information would be helpful in answering the questions. We will have an index of all the topics discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field, so you could look and there'll be timestamps for all the questions so you quickly navigate to different topics. If you want to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you can go to cubaseindex.com, and we see that Jan, who's on the live stream, he's created that site. It's a wonderful resource. I just did a count up for a report, so you've covered over 39,000 questions. So it's a great way to kind of search for a particular topic. We also have two people as serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. So we'll give special thanks to them. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it out of the goodness of their hearts to make it a better community experience. We also want to give a special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. So that's a wonderful resource of information, tutorials for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching us live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. All right, so we see Stefan checking in from Sweden. We have a question from Ricky Tera. How to convert CCX to another CC for any MIDI controller. So there's a couple ways. One is to utilize I'll come over here. Let's open up just a quick plugin, and we'll call this the MIDI monitor plugin. So I'm just going to come over here. Let's get to the MIDI inserts, and just so that we could show this, it's not required to do it. So right now I'm going to move the modulation wheel on my controller, and we can see that this is CC. We're transmitting MIDI controller 1. So let's say if I want to transmit MIDI CC 1 but still use this particular controller, what we could use is, if we go to an instrument or MIDI track, we'll go to the routing area, and we'll see this little squiggly line, and we'll call this our input transformer. We could assign this globally. That could be used at the project level or at the track level. I'm going to assign to the track, and let's open the panel. And I'm going to turn this on, and what this is going to do is to take incoming MIDI CC messages or incoming MIDI messages, and we can modify them in real time. So what we're going to do is say I want to take my type is equal to a MIDI controller, and then we could choose our subtype, and we're going to say is equal to CC1. So what I want to do now is take incoming MIDI CC1 messages, and let's say I want to change these into MIDI CC11. So we're going from CC1 to CC11. So what we're going to do is choose Insert, and we're going to change I think if we come over here to subtype, and we'll say add, and I'm going to choose 10. Okay, so now when I move my CC1 wheel, we're now transmitting MIDI CC11. So we're changing that MIDI CC message in real time from CC1 to CC11. So if I turn this off, we can now see CC1. I turn this on. So again, we're going to take type is equal to the controller, and here we could specify what controller is actually being used. So in this case, it's my modulation wheel. And then we're going to take our subtype, which is going to be the MIDI controller number. So if we wanted to turn this into main volume, I would add 6. So we go from CC1 to CC7. So it's a difference of 6. If I wanted to translate this MIDI CC1 message to CC11, at that point I would just choose to add MIDI controllers. I would choose the value of 10. So right now my modulation wheel is now transmitting MIDI expression. Turn that off, we're back to our mod wheel. Turn that on, it's now expression, modulation. So you could do it just like that. And you could say presets if you need to do that regularly. All right, so we have Claes Olsen just checking in from Malmö, Sweden. Thanks for joining us. We have Greg Malik. He says, is it poor conduct to ask questions now? So you can ask questions anytime you want. It's great to see you on again. All right, always wonderful to see Jazz Dude and Gareth. Gareth is joining from a rainy and sunny Bilbao, Spain. All right. We see Jan from Cubase Index. So Greg Malik is just asking, his question is there a way to set up synth or sampler setups and easily import them into new projects? So if we are going with like a new project, so let's say if I come here, and I've now we'll add an instrument track. So we'll just come over. Okay, let me just check my. So now let's say if I've modified this particular preset here in Retrolog, so we'll call this Greg Retro. And let's say if I want to add a sampler track, so I'll come over and let me just add a quick loop. Let me just check my audio connections here quickly. Okay, so now we'll come here. All right, and let's make a sampler track. So I'm going to come over here. Okay, so we have a sampler track and an instrument track. So if I wanted to recall these independently, so let's say if I come in, I take this, I've now added, let's say an arpeggio to it. I can come over. All right, so now what I want to do is I could right click and we'll say save track preset. So we'll say Greg, and we'll call this retro log ARP. So we'll save, and now let's come over here. I'll select this and let's save this as a track preset. So again, right click, save as track preset. Okay, so, and I could save both of them as a single track preset if I wanted to, like a multi preset. But let's say if I was doing, I removed both of these tracks. So we'll right click, let's remove the selected tracks. I will come over here to my media bay. We'll go to presets, and then we'll see, let's come over here to user presets, and we'll say track presets. And we'll say sampler, and then we can see our Greg sampler track. So I could double click, and that would load up the sampler track. Let's say if we wanted to go to an instrument track, we could just come over here, and we'll see our Greg retro log. So I could double click, and now when we go to all of those, particular settings are preserved. And if we wanted to save both of these together, we could just simply save a track preset. We'll call this May 2nd multi. So when I go to my media bay, we could just come right over here and say, okay, we want to go to user presets. And then if you go to track presets to multi, we can say May 2nd multi, drag and drop, and both of those tracks would automatically be added as a single entity if you wanted to. So let me know if that works for you, Greg. And great to see you on again. All right, we see it's 29 degrees in Southwest Germany, Celsius. Wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer. All right, we see Uno Memento from Finland. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. All right, so Darshana Rajapaksha asks, hello, please can you help me? I can't install Cubase through Download Assistant. It's failing all the time. Why is that? So if you do have difficulties with the Download Assistant, it works for the vast majority of people. But one of the things that you could do is just simply you could get the same things from the web browser. So if you go Cubase 14 installation, you can see when you come over here to the Cubase 14 downloads, you could pick, okay, so once you come over here, you could download all of Cubase 14 directly from the browser right here. So you could download everything and be able to install. So if for some reason the Steinberg Download Assistant isn't working for you, you could just go to the Cubase 14 downloads from the Steinberg website, and you could download everything directly from here as well. All right, we see Greg Malik sending aloha from Hawaii, Cubase 14 Pro and Windows 10. So I was just in Maui for a week with my family 2 weeks ago. So just always love going to Hawaii. So and thanks for joining us again. And Gareth says he heard that Cubase works even better in Hawaii than anywhere else. So it has a particular groove to it in Hawaii. So, but you have to have ukuleles in your music to make it work. All right, and we see Greg Malik says, by the way, he had problems with installing 14 Pro. Turns out the update from 13 Pro needed manual unzipping to install. Installer had problems. Okay. All right, wonderful to see Vince from Winnipeg. It's Flyvy. Great to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, Bratman Studio Rick with cinnamon toast and brown sugar maple oatmeal from Whittier, California. It's a great way to enjoy Club Cubase on a cold, overcast Friday. All right. All right, so Nas asks, hi Greg, when I click in the mouse in the timeline and zoom out normally, I kept seeing the waveform, but now suddenly not. Is this because of the last update? So it's probably going to be a preference setting. So let's come over. All right, so when we kind of zoom in, let me make this the active project. So as we zoom in, we see the waveforms the whole time. On kind of older computers, there would be kind of an issue at times with the graphics card. So there was a preference that was introduced that could affect that behavior. So let's say if we go to editing audio, it's called quick zoom. Let me just see if it's... Let's see if it's under zoom, maybe. Okay, so if we go to editing, to zoom, we'll see this check mark for quick zoom. So let's go ahead and I'll hit apply. So now when I go to zoom in, the waveform will disappear until I let go of the mouse. So check. So if we're looking at our preferences, we can just kind of come. So right now, as we're zooming, the waveform disappears. And to change that behavior, try going to your preferences or settings, to editing, to zoom, and make sure that quick zoom is unchecked. Then I think that will solve the problem for you. All right, Michael Teens is sending ice creams to all of us lovely people, according to Gareth. So, all right, we have Tony Trunzo checking in from Australia. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Martin sending greetings from Germany. All right, Ness is sending greetings to everyone from Holland. All right, wonderful to see Tim K on from Zeist in the Netherlands. Miss Cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to everyone. All right, wonderful to see Mark Rabin on from Montana. Everyone give a big woof to Stella, his dog. So, hope you're doing well, Mark. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We have Cornell also joining from the Netherlands. Okay, Ankeprof asks, is there an easy way of making some samples its favorites for me to always access them easily? Okay, so let's say if I was going through my media bay here, and I, often, like one of the things I do, I get a new instrument, I will, just simply kind of come over here, and let's say if I'm listening to different samples, I could come over here. Now, one of the things that we could actually see, I'll just kind of extend this over, is this little star rating system. So once that we are here, we could just say, I want to, I like this, and I'm going to give that 4 samples, 4 stars, and I'm going to give that 5 stars. So now what we could actually do is just kind of, look for our different samples that are like 4 and 5 stars. So if we just kind of just find it over here. So if we go to like the main media bay, we'll find it there first. So as soon as we open this up, we could just say, okay, I want to look for samples. We'll say on this computer, and we can say all ratings, or we can say I'm only looking for 4-star or 5-star rating. So this way we could actually just simply kind of actually do ratings. So when we come over here, let me just see if I remember where to select our different ratings. Let me just see if it's... I thought it was like a little... Let me just... But there is kind of like a rating search that we could do over here as well. So, but if you just kind of go over here to the media bay, you could just simply adjust the ratings on particular files, and then say I don't want to see anything that's, you know, below 3 stars or 1 star rating. So consider a rating, using the rating system for that, and then you could kind of customize your sounds as you see fit. And if it's and I see Mark Rabin's comment, so if it's a particular folder that you see, if we want to come over here, we can go to your file browser, and you can say, oh, I really like this folder. We could right click on it and say add favorites. So I'll just give that a name, and then when we come over here, we could just go to your favorites folder and be able to quickly access that. And that's if everything is within a common folder. All right, wonderful to see Sway TV and Recording Studio from New Jersey on. Thanks for joining us. And we see Vincent joining as well. All right, so we see T7F4 just says, how do I sidechain with ring mod? So let's see if the ring modulator has a sidechain input. All right, so let's see if we come over here. All right, so usually like the ring modulator doesn't have a dedicated sidechain input, but let's say if I wanted to take, I'll just do a quick pattern here. All right, so let's say if I wanted to, let's say if I have my ring modulators, I'm not sure if you want, so let's see if we come over here and let's put a compressor, just a compressor before the ring modulator. So if we come over here, let's just put like a standard compressor, and I'm going to sidechain the compressor. So we're going to say the sidechain is coming from the Urban Ballads kit. And let's go, and we're just going to basically just, while we're playing, so you could, let's see if we switch the order of it. Okay, so let's say if we come here, we'll turn off the side chain. All right, let me try. Just revert this and we'll start from scratch. All right, so let's say we'll put our ring modulator here. So let's go to our modulation. Let's go to ring modulator. So let's say as we play, I'm just gonna try it on just a new project here, make it easier. So okay, so let's say we have this as our loop. Let's check. I'm just going to check my routing here again. Okay, so let's come over here. We'll just not sure why it's not sounding. I'll just try one more new project. Sorry about that. But I think we could also do this maybe with modulators. weird tapping on my system, but let's see if we come over here and let's open up the let's say we have under modulation and we go to the ring modulator. So even though this doesn't have a dedicated sidechain input, if you wanted to adjust, let's say if we have a signal that was being the sidechain, so what you could do is just go to the modulators and we could set up, so if we come over here, we could do an envelope follower. So, and we want the envelope follower to just kind of play. So we'll take an instrument track here. Let's say we'll do just a quick Groove Agent SE. Alright, so we have so what we want to do now is we'll come over here. We have this particular track, we'll go to the modulators. And we're going to say, okay, we're going to do our sidechain input here. So I want to first define the parameter. So we're going to open up the ring modulator and let's assign that particular parameter. As we come over here, let's now say we want to do a sidechain input, and our sidechain is coming from the Groove Agent. So as we do this, that we could just set up, and you can see kind of the modulation come here, and then you could just kind of sidechain that particular effect using the envelope follower. I'm not sure why this loop isn't playing normally, but that could be the method to do it. So use the envelope follower, and then as it's being sidechained from the input, at that point it will just simply take the output of that effect down for you. Sorry, it took a while to get there. Okay. All right, we have John Barry checking in from English Riviera. All right, Tony Trunzo asks, hi Greg, could you tell me what the project input transformer is and how to use it, please? So just like how we had seen before, that when I move my modulation wheel and I wanted to have my modulation wheel do a completely different controller value. So for here, what the project input transformer allows us to do, if this is something that we're going to be doing repeatedly, we could go to our project input transformer and we could set this up. So we're going to activate it. We're going to say, okay, our controller is now, we'll say our subtype is going to be controller 1. And for our action, we want to go to our subtype and we'll add 10. Okay, so I could call this up as a preset, and all we would need to do is once we come over here, so if we wanted to use that, so this would be globally done, so I wouldn't have to set it on a track by track basis. And if we want to go to our, if we want to assign it to a particular track, we could do that. If we wanted this to only be a particular track transformer, but this way, if I always want to have this one particular CC mapped to another CC or transform incoming MIDI notes, I could do that globally. I could assign that global setting to a particular track and have a different input transformer on different tracks, but this allows us to have kind of a global input transformer so we don't have to set it up every single time. All right, Mark Rabin just says, how do I migrate away from the dongles? So just about all of the modern versions of Steinberg software that's been released in the last 2.5 years are all based on the e-licenser. So a lot of people still have their dongle connected, but all the licenses have migrated over to the Steinberg licensing system. If you go to your My Steinberg account from the Steinberg website at steinberg.net, you could go to your products, and if you have products that are utilizing the e-licenser that you haven't transferred over, you probably, like most of the content, will have voucher licenses to migrate, to turn your e-licenser into the Steinberg, to transform the licenses from e-licenser directly to the Steinberg licensing. All right, Anton in Rock Trust Boyko asks, hey Greg in chat, question, I'm using outboard gear in a master chain and final signal from my limiter Legia Expressor is -3 dB on stereo out, dB meter of Cubase 14. What it could be, is it a limitation? So when you're using if you're using it as an external process, so if we come over here, let's say if we go to your audio connections and we see external effects, so as we come over here, we could route these to your external, so you take the input and output. So I'm not sure if you're using it as an external connection. So if we do your external bus here, when we go to utilize an external insert, let's say we go to our audio, we go to our external plugins, we could now come over here and you could adjust the gain. So you could adjust it there. Now, if you're just going from your audio outputs directly in, it could also be a pan law setting. So if we go and you hit the Shift plus the S key, or just go to project settings, you could also try to just adjust, you'll see the pan law settings. So it could be that depending on how it's being routed, that the pan law settings are affecting the input. So you could adjust the pan law settings and see if that makes a difference as well. Thanks for joining the live stream today. All right, we have VTS 404, I believe that's Vishnu. All right, so we have Braxel saying hello to everyone. Robert Gentry asks, sorry, just disappeared on me. Sorry, my chat field jumped on me. Okay, Robert Gentry's question is, hi Greg, is there a way to change track and clip colors back to the default in Cubase 14? Thanks. There really isn't a default setting. So sometimes, if we could take the track colors are actually going to be stored within the project. But there really isn't like so if we come over, let's go to your project menu and you go to your project colors setup. If you come over here and you just set the number of basic colors to 16 and number of color tints to 1, that will kind of give you the so you could see that, but also if you go to options, you could try to click on reset color set to default. You could say, and that's assuming that you haven't saved a color set as and overridden the choice as your default. So, but you could just try going again to the project menu, to project color setup, to Options tab and reset color set to default. All right, Mark Ravens is saying he's authored 150 new songs in 3 months. He's done writing for a bit. Time to polish. Congratulations, it's a huge output. So you see from Vincent, Greg, do you have Cubase 12 installed? If so, can you compare the loading times in the mix console history in Cubase 12 versus 14? From Cubase 14 is significantly slower than 12. I don't have Cubase 14. I don't have Cubase 12 installed. I just got this computer a couple months ago, so everything is on the latest versions. I can have it installed for Monday's live stream if that works. If you want to send me an email reminder to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to have version 12. We can take a look and see if it's behaving the same or if there's difference in speed. All right, so we have Rude Pause saying hi from Europe. All right, so and his question is, what is the difference between focus quick controls and quick controls, and how to properly set this up for different VSTs? Okay, so let me move my controller, get it set up here so we can show this. All right. So focus quick controllers allow you to kind of dynamically change depending on what's going on in the project. So let's say I have an audio track, and in this I'm going to load up a couple inserts. So let's go to like the VST bass amp, and I want a delay. So we'll come over here, say your studio delay. And let's do like a flanger. Okay, so when we have quick controls, we can say, okay, on this track, I always want to have, so when you come up with MIDI remote, we'll come over here and let's say I want to use my Chord Nano controller. I have my quick control settings here. So a lot of times when we're on a track, if we're using quick controls, we could dedicate kind of 8 particular parameters. So I could say, okay, I want to go to my quick control. So quick control 1 I'll move this, that will learn that. So now when I adjust, we could assign quick control. So those will kind of be fixed. So the normal quick controls will be kind of fixed to the 8 parameters. If we're using focus quick controls, let's say now I'm here and I have quick controls for the track and it's controlling my volume, pan, let's say 2 bands of EQ and 4 aux ends. Let's say that's my quick controls. But now when I go with focus quick controls, whatever plugin is in focus, when I open this up, I can now, this is the active window, I move my quick controls, and the quick controls are dynamically being allocated to this plugin. If I go to another plugin, I move the quick controls, it's automatically changing the quick control values for this plugin as well as this plugin. So whatever plugin is on top, that is the one. So the focus quick controls will allow you to immediately, access whatever particular parameter, whatever plugin or instrument is directly on top. So this way I don't have to be limited to 8 quick controls, which are fixed parameters. But focus quick controls can be used for just controlling different parameters of different plugins just without having to reassign these parameters. And if we wanted to assign the quick control parameters, we'll see this little QC when we open up plugins, and then we could define the 8 parameters that we have set for this particular plugin. So this way we could dynamically change and alter the plugins and the plugin parameters without having to reassign, but the focus quick controls will look at whatever is in focus and will do control for that. So if I have my audio track selected, it's going to do that. If I go to a plugin, it's going to control the plugin. If I go to a different plugin, it'll just automatically control that. So whatever's in focus, the focus quick controls will immediately start to control that without having to assign every single parameter. All right, we see Mark Rabin just says he's happy to be here. All right, so we see DJ Mixes has high greetings from Switzerland. And it says, I made the Bada Bada Bass to Afro House remix with Cubase 14 Pro, Shimmer, Spectral modulators, and all the tips from Greg. Hope you like it. So I'll make sure to check it out. Thanks for sharing the information. And we're glad that it worked out well for you and that the Club Cubase live streams were helpful. You'll see Rude Paz is also from the Netherlands. Tim K's giving a big woof to Stella. All right, so we have the artist known as Love, I believe from New York, says, hello, hope everyone's doing great. Thank you for all you do, Greg. So you're welcome. Glad to be able to help. All right, Anton, in Rock Trust Boyko asks, question, when we get 5 to 6 tracks layering on one track and start to moving one of them, it's not as transparent like in Cubase 12, and I can't see a track underneath to match them. Can I change it like in Cubase 12? All right, so let's say I'll just open up a project here. I think I have a comping. All right, so here I have like multiple, I think I have multiple layers. Let me just, all right. So here we have our multiple tracks on that are all kind of layered on top of each other. So if we come over here, I could see kind of all the tracks. I don't think that behavior has changed between, so let's say if I was just kind of so if I were kind of to move the events, I could see the underlying events, and then if I wanted to just kind of switch, so I think the behavior is still the same, but it could be, you know, like all of the underlying tracks are still there, but again, they may not be visible, you know, like here, if we look like right in this area, as I grab it, you can see the underlying tracks as we go. So we could see multiple underlying tracks there. So I don't think there's any change from version 12 to 14 with that. All right, we see DJ Ashu just saying hi from checking in from Ethiopia. Thanks for joining us. Tim K has whacked the like button. All right. Artist known as Love is sending a big woof to Stella. All right, and we have Peter checking in from Montreal. Hope you're well. And we have Soren in Sweden. All right, Artist known as Love wants people to hit the like button. See Fly V. Vince is at his parents' house and his old PC's updating, so he's watching on a phone. All right, Resonant Serpent says, any idea when the next maintenance update is out? So I know Steinberg is always working on new versions, new maintenance versions, so but they generally don't announce it in advance because it's always going through different testing phases. But when it's out, they'll announce it. All right, so HALion just says, hello, Greg. In Cubase 14, the top line at Cubase, there where the name of the project you're working in is written, this line is black. I want to put it white again. Is it possible? Will it be possible? So I guess this line here. So I think, depending on, like I know that they do different analysis. So right now I think it's dark because this frame that we see is white, and they always, and it's kind of interesting, been online with some of the Steinberg team, and they actually have tests to make sure that the contrast is the highest level of contrast between text and parts, so that parts don't have white text with a white background. So I think, being that this is kind of light colored, that having white text may be hard to read. So I think that's probably the intention of that. So I don't know of a way to change that. So depending on like the color of tracks, so let's say if I change this color here to like a really dark color and we see the text, so let's say if we were to kind of just, have like almost like a black color, that the text could change between white and black just depending upon the contrast with colors. So I think if you had white text with the white background, that would be, much harder to see. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so we have Raw Justice Hip Hop checking in from Capitol Heights in Maryland. Is working on a project late in Cubase and lost track of time. And we have Diamond District Studios from Cape Town, South Africa. All right. And he asks, is there a way to set in and out marker points using shortcut keys like in Adobe Premiere? I often have to zoom in to set these before bouncing a mix. Okay, so if, wherever your song position is, I think that there are keyboard shortcuts for like set left locator at position. Let me just look it up so I don't have to have brain cramps. So let's say, we'll say set left locator to project. So we have command plus number 1. So if I come here, if you hit the control or the command key, you can move the left and right arrows. So that's if I hit command or control plus 2, I could move the left and move the right arrow to the cursor position. So if I want to rewind, I want my left locator there. There's also shortcuts if I select the event and hit the letter P, that will set the locator range around around this selected event. Or if I hit, let's say if I'm here and I hit Control or Command A to select all, then hit P, that will automatically set the left and right locators around particular areas. If we have a marker track, so let's say if we come here and we have a marker track, you could just double click with the range tool between two markers, and then you could have and set the locator range like that as well. So let me know if those would help. All right, Ghost99 is a quick question. I just bought a new MIDI keyboard, so can I link VST synth parameters like cutoff with the keyboard knobs and record manual automation instead of using automation points using the mouse? Yeah, so and it could be So let's say if we want to open up a synth, we'll open up something like a retro log. All right, so if I'm here and I want to, let's say, control this particular parameter here, I can, so we'll come over, let's say, okay, we just have retro log. So a lot of instruments may give you the ability to learn a CC, and then, you know, as you move a parameter, that would automatically assign that MIDI CC just like that. Now, if we're using your controller and you have it set up as like the focus quick controls, like if we come over here to the MIDI remote, every plugin will just have kind of the 8 relevant to top parameters. Where I could just simply adjust my quick control knobs here. So say as I move my quick control, we can see that I move quick control 2. That's going to control the resonance. So these can automatically, so if you assign these in the MIDI remote for your keyboard as focus quick controls, you can just simply also come right over here and just say we want to assign these to MIDI remote, pick up for mapping, and then any parameter that's in your MIDI remote, you could just say, okay, I want to control that and assign that keyboard function within the instrument. If you kind of want the similar level of controls, just come over here again, click on the quick controls, and then anytime you open up a particular instrument, you could assign the 8 relevant parameters, and you could go, here's the default parameters from the instrument, and you could have different banks of 8 parameters as well. So you could do very easy control from your synthesizer, from your controller. All right, so Anton asks, can you explain routing for printing a mix in Cubase 14 without extra conversion? Is it input channels from converter, or can you print from pre-stereo out group? So you could, so let's say if we have a project here, okay, so let's say, okay, I want to take this project here. So I could just simply come over here. I'm going to select all, hit the letter P. And then if we wanted to come over here, we could just say, okay, I want to do my audio mix down. We could do I'm just going to do a single stereo mix, and I could just come right over here and we could choose to create audio track. So when we export, we can now see our stereo mix file directly here at the bottom. I chose to do a mono down mix, but if we just come over, it's your audio mix down, and we'll say, okay, I want it to be interleaved. And at this point, we could just simply will have our stereo mix that's automatically printed into the file right there. So we could just see and just print right there. Now if you're running it through like an external processor, or through an external chain. If it's defined in your, let's say if we go to your audio connections and we go to your external effects, and it could be just a particular chain. So if you're printing it through like an analog chain as the final step, if you come over and just say, okay, I want to include my external plugins here, it would do a real-time export and capture all of the audio directly back from your external processing chain as well. So let me know if that's helpful. All right. Okay, so we see Mark Raven says, oh, I like that drum loop. All for unknown, unknown for all asks. In the chord track, tab button doesn't work in Cubase 14. So let me just... All right, so let me just... So I'm not, let me know. It says toggle computer keyboard doesn't work too. So let me know like what you want to do with the tab key. So say if I'm here, like often the tab key allows us to navigate between our different window zones. So, but I'm not sure. Let me know what functionality you were expecting the tab key to do in the chord track. You said toggle computer keyboard doesn't work too. So let's say if I'm here, I will just come over to a particular track. So now, so we're playing directly from here, and now when the on-screen keyboard is open, that the keys don't function, so you would need to turn off the keyboard if you want the keys to function. But let me know exactly what functionality that you expect the tab key to do in the chord track. All right. All right. My chat field just jumped. Okay. So FlyV asks, what's a strategic way to begin making a track? Drums, I assume, but how would I go about? So a lot of people will start with drums as inspiration. Some people will sing something. It really depends on, like some people will come up with the lyrics first and sing. Some people will come up with the chords and then add a melody. Some people start with the melody. Some people need a groove to start chords or a groove to start a melody. So there's no right or wrong way to start. I think a good strategy, like I'm a bass player, so if I was writing and I'm not like a traditional, I'm not a songwriter. I have tremendous respect for composers and songwriters, but I do more editing, maybe producing, performing. But how I kind of like to start a track is just to kind of come over here. Let's say, okay, I want to start off. I like starting off with something in Groove Agent because playing to a click track could be sometimes inspirational. But if I want it to come over and just say, okay, I want to have just like a simple pattern. So I'll come over here, and so now I can say follow transport. All right, so say I have a pattern, and now when I stop, the pattern stops. You know, and if I'm working with like and especially I like this with, if I switch to, let's come over and say, okay, I want to do, so I could start off with something to kind of write to. So when I stop, if I put this on follow transport, my groove agent stops. I could come over here. But let's say I've now kind of built up a song. So I want to add, let's say, an instrument track. So let's say now we want to come over to, let's load up a quick bass sound. All right, so let's, so it's okay, now I want to maybe try recording an idea. And now I could just kind of come over here, and even though the drums are just kind of playing and with like a simple pattern, if I kind of now have built the song up, I could say, okay, I want to do like natural variations. I want this to be a little more complex. And every 8 bars do a fill. So while we're kind of maybe starting with a simple part, I could just add other elements, and we could just throw in drum fill, so it's not something that's so static. But I think that there's no, however you get a song done, whether you start with drums or not, you start with guitar and have your drums follow the guitar after doing a tempo mapping, or you just lay down a vocal and add all the parts, as long as you get something done, whatever that method is, will work for you. All right, so Quellen says Spectral layers 1.11, which will be installed Cubase 14, is not available in the ARA section. Cubase 14 Pro only is standalone. Is this a bug on Cubase 14.02? So I have the full Spectral layers, version. So, but when I come over here to the extension, so when let's say if I go to, my audio track here, so, and we see the extension that, here, and because I have the Spectral Layers Pro license, Spectral Layers would show up. Let me just drop an audio file in. So now when I double click here, but I think there's, So check to make sure everything is installed correctly. And make sure that when you go to your Steinberg activation manager that everything is showing up there. But your spectral layers should automatically show up for you directly there. But check to make sure you have the license is activated, and that you have if you have any trial versions, and but it should automatically show up. But I have the full licenses, so and that would just see whatever spectral layers you have licensed. And if you didn't have an Elements or Pro license, my Spectral Layers 1 would show up. Maybe other people could chime in and see if they've had issues running Spectral Layers 1 with their 14.02. You see Gareth mentioning he has it available on his system. All right, wonderful to see Kept Energy Music checking in from Pennsylvania. All right, we see Anton Boyko just says, geez, thanks for the panel advice. All right, Bernadette Denton Daly, big hello from Ireland. Actually, I'm going to be going to Ireland on a quick trip. My wife will be going to Dublin, never been before, so we're looking forward to it. So let me know what we should do in Dublin if you're familiar with it. Looking for travel advice. All right. See, Gareth is saying Studio Delay gets a lot of use there, so it's great. Yeah, it's a wonderful plugin. And we see Jazz Dude's digging the Cubase 14 modulators as best addition, best add-on ever. All right, so we see Rodolfo Custodio says, I wish the color of events on the events were inverted, making it darker overall. So, I mean, you could change, so if you want to change the color scheme, so let's say if I come over here, let's go to the project menu to the project color setup. So if I want to take like color 16 here and make it really dark, you could come over and just kind of customize. So now when I have my event, let's say I apply and I come over here and I want to change the colors. We could have very dark colors, and if you wanted to, change the backgrounds to make it darker, even if we go to your preferences or settings and go to color schemes under user interface, you could set the project color to be darker if you wanted to as well. So you could just adjust those particular aspects. So you could change the colors if you want to make them all darker if that's what you want to do. So Theory Suprayan asks, also, is there a way to make the timeline lines brighter? Okay, so I guess it's going to be like these grid lines. So let's take a look. It's probably going to be in the same area. So let's go to settings. So grid lines, so let's come here and we'll hit OK, and you can see that the grid lines have now become brighter. So go to your preferences or settings and go to user interface color schemes, and then you can see the project area background. You could change the grid lines color right there. And let me go back to my we'll reset my colors. So now, all right. All right, so Rodolfo Custodio says the same color when you select the event or clip, that should be the default color. I think if you were doing that, it might be hard. If it was going to be the same color for selected events, that it may be hard to. I think after a while, it may just be hard to distinguish what is selected versus not selected. So, and we had people that complained previously because, like in Nuendo, you could have just the outline selected and it wasn't as obvious what events were selected and which were not. So, but you could try adjusting the color scheme a bit more to your liking. Parabot 2 just says, "Hi Greg, what's your favorite feature?" I probably, there's zillions of them. I don't know if I have one that I would call a favorite. Maybe something that I find useful for projects I work on is being able to take like a 2-track mix. So let's say if I come here, let's do a new project. And I come over to, let's import an audio file here quickly. Okay, so let's say, I want to go here. I want to take like this song. I like being able to take a particular file. So let's say I want to take this, and like right now, if I was just kind of starting a project and someone, just didn't give me, so I don't know what the tempo is. So I like two things that I really like is being able to do my tempo detection. So if we come here to our tempo track, so let's say I want to take that, and now I also want to take that track and go to my chord track and say create chord events. So I like being able to quickly get tempos of tracks and the chords. So if I'm like recording, I can now just have a great head start working on different projects just by immediately finding chords and tempo. So those things I find really helpful. But there's 14,000 other features I think are amazing and creative and just really brilliant as well. But two that just kind of come off the top of my head. All right, my chat field jumped. All right, Ivan Jokner asks, "Hi Greg, in Cubase 14 found that keyboard tab button changed its behavior in Cubase 12. I could cycle through navigation on track presets window. Now tab function selects presets only. Can it be brought back?" Okay. So let's open up like my track presets. So I'm not sure if you're loading track presets here. So here we can, all right, so now tab function selects presets only. So I could cycle through navigation on the track presets. So it looks like it's, so let's say if I have, So say if I'm here, so if I use my up and down arrows, so let's see, and I could install version 12 just to see, but when I come over here, let's say I load a track preset. So if I have this tab selected, the tab key will navigate between the different fields, and I could use the up down arrows to select my different track presets. I will install version 12 for Tuesday's live stream and see if that behavior was different. But if you could confirm that that's kind of the functionality that the tab key was selecting different functions as opposed to maybe navigating up and down or cycling through these. If we're selecting different fields here with the tab key. So if you could clarify that, I will have, but I will, regardless, I'll have version 12 installed for Tuesday's live stream. All right, we see just further clarifications because I cannot create a macro in my Metagrid Pro by pressing tab 3 times in order to get to the search bar. Okay, yeah, I'll get version 12 installed this weekend so we can take a look at it. All right, Theory Suprayan asks another one. Pretend we have 10 tracks and we have to assign different consecutive outputs to them, out 1, out 2, out 10. Is there a way to quickly assign them, or do we have to change those one at a time? So I think if you just hold down the shift key, that will do it. So let's just close this project. All right, so we'll do a new project. Let's add 10 audio tracks. And we'll make these mono. Okay, and let's go to the audio connections, and I want to assign 10 mono outs. Okay, so we have, let's say, our 10 mono outs here. All right, so we can see that these are all going to stereo out. If we look right here, we can see our stereo out. All right, so let's select. All right, so I'm just going to hold down my shift key, select from the top one, mono out. So if I did it right, you can see mono out 2, out 3, out 4. So this will consecutively assign the outputs, so you don't have to do it all at once. So if you want to assign them all the same value, we would use Alt or Option plus Shift. If we wanted to increment, we use just the Shift key. So again, just select them all and hold down the Shift, select the first entry, and that will incrementally do the routing for you. All right, John Roddy asks, hi Greg, in WaveLab 12, how can you choose which wave files you want to play when dealing with a Polywave? After I import from my sound devices, I want to just play wave 3 and wave file 4. All right, so let's take a look. may not have. Let's see if we can. I think I have a 5.1 interleaved. Let's see if I may have it already in a project. So let me see if it's. Let's see if I could just find that one. All right, so let's say we have, let me just, all right, let's try this too. Let me just see if I could just find it from Cubase real quick here. Okay, so now Okay, so we have, let's say, our 5.1 here. So let's say it's your multi-channel. So, and if you only want to hear, so choose which files you want to play when dealing with polywaves. After I import them in my sound devices, I want to just play wave file 3 and 4. So let me know if it's interleaved. I think that you could just solo. Like if it's your interleaved file here, and I'm not set up for, let me just make sure that I have the right audio interface. Yeah, I don't have. I'm not set up for the live stream to playback 5.1, but let's see if we come over. So if you want to just, so if it's kind of recording all of it as kind of like an interlead file, I believe that, let me know if you just tried to solo this. And I think that also, if we come over to, I just have a 2-in, 2-out interface, but you could choose which outputs that it's kind of being routed to here. But I think, it could be just that if it's a 5.1 file, I could, if you want, I could maybe have a surround capable file. But let me know what happens if you just hit the solo here to play back and audition your different files right there from Wavelab. Sorry, it took a while to get there. Okay. So, and I see from John Roddy, it says it maybe delete wave file 3 and 4 of the polywave. So I think you're going to have to, a function just to come over here and just to, turn it, if it's going to be an interlead file, you may have to convert it to different mono files or different stereo files. All right, Mr. Beer asks, hey, how do you reset all faders and panning at once? So let's say if we have a number of audio tracks and they're all at different values. All right, so I'm going to select all of these tracks. I'm going to enable Q-Link. And then I think if we just hit Control or Command or that while we set so we could link these, but if we put these to absolute and we link, we could now just come over and so if we just, so while these are all kind of set, so let's say if I turn this off, we have all of our values set accordingly here. So if you put Q-Link on, put absolute, and click on a value while holding down Control or Command, you can now kind of reset all of them to their default value, whether it's the center pan or 0 dB. All right, David M asks, hi Greg, if I click on the space in the project, the cursor moves without going to the ruler. Is there a way to click anywhere in the project to move the cursor there? So if you want to, I think it's just, so my cursor position is here, and if we hold down, let's say if we have, just get the, I think if we go over here, we could see, I think it's, is it control? I'll just go to different project here real quick. All right, so I think if we go to the settings and we go tools, let me just check my tool modifiers. Let's say for my select tool, so if we set cursor position, so now if we use a modifier key here, so now if we come over, we don't have any modifier key, and this may have changed with, but let's change that, and you may check, just kind of, let's load up the defaults here for the tool modifiers, but let's say we get to our select tool, and I want to use Option or Alt plus Shift. That'll be the default behavior. So now wherever I click, the cursor will just go. So Alt or Option plus Shift, and the cursor will navigate anywhere in a project that you click, empty space or not. But check just the behavior, and you could set it again in preferences or settings. Under tool modifiers, go to the select tool, and then you'll see set cursor position, and you could change the modifier keys there. So, but try Alt or Option plus Shift, and that's the default setting there, David. All right, Theory Suprayan asks another one. When inserting a plugin, a compressor, for example, can we define our own default settings? All right, so let's say if we come over here, so it may be different for each plugin, but let's say if I come and we have our inserts, we'll go to, let's say, our compressor. All right, sometimes we could come over and just, we'll see save as default preset, so that every time you open up a plugin, and this may not be a feature in all plugins, but if we come here and every time I add this compressor, I want that, we could just choose save as default preset, and then when we open the plugin, it would automatically start with those particular settings that were saved as a default preset. All right, so we see GBSTR says I also had the spectral layer stuck on the elements version. So yeah, just make sure that you have, if you go to the Steinberg activation manager, that you have the, the license is activated for your system. Okay, so we see from Anton Boyko, let me just clear my throat. All right, asks, thanks again for the answer about the printing chain from DAC to outboard, external plugin, then back to DAC. real-time print on a track through the input channel of the DAC. Is that correct? So yeah, that's all you'd have to do. Is if you just then export audio mix down, it would do real-time nature since it's including an external processor. And then when you export, it would go through all your software plugins and your hardware chain. All right, John Roddy asks, when I open Spectral layers in Nuendo 14, it opens the Go version. I have to open Wavelab as an ARA and then Spectral layers 10 from there. Spectral layers 11 doesn't appear in the drop-down menu. Got the track. All right, so then I see Spectral layers 10, I mean. Okay, so when I open Spectral layers in Nuendo 14, it opens the Go version. I have to open Wavelab as an ARA, then Spectral layers 10 from there. So I would, if it's, so it sounds like from the descriptions that your Spectral layers 10 isn't showing up until you maybe open up Wavelab ARA. So, try just out of curiosity to see if you reset. So if you start your Nuendo 14 and hold down Command Option Shift or Alt Control Shift, you can start it where you can bypass the particular, basically it'll bypass the user preferences temporarily and see if that makes a difference. So if I was opening up Nuendo, I would come right over here and say, okay, I'm going to hold down Command Option Shift or Alt Control Shift, and you'll get this. You try disabling the current preferences and see if that makes a difference for you. But I'll go ahead and just open up Nuendo 14. I have Spectral layers and make sure that you have like the latest version of Spectral layers installed. So if I come here, let me just, so if I add a couple tracks here, and then we just go to the extensions that both of them were showing up. But check in your licenses to make sure that your licenses are both activated in the Steinberg Activation Manager. And you could email me. I could do some more research on it if you email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we have DigiBeats checking in from Jamaica, Queens in New York. My stepsister lives there. All right, my chat field just jumped. All right. All right, Keys for Life asks, hi, how to trim or resize the same pattern created in the pattern creator to fit different event lengths? Now I'm converting pattern to MIDI event and resizing. Is there any other way? All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say I'll go ahead and have my pattern here. So I'll just make a new pattern quickly. Okay, so let's say if, all right, so let's say how to trim or resize the same pattern created in the pattern editor to fit different event lengths. All right, so let's say I just have, this is my pattern here. Let me just, all right, so if we want to change the length of the pattern, so you know, so what we could do is, so let's say if we have this pattern, I could duplicate the pattern. So let's say this pattern I want to have, you know, 12 steps. You know, you could now just come over here and adjust how many steps that you have for a particular pattern overall. So if, I guess we could do it for the selected, but if we just come directly here, we could say I want this pattern to be 8 steps. I want it to be 20, you know, 32 steps. So we could adjust kind of the length of the pattern right here. So we could go back to this pattern. Okay. And now I want to take this pattern and adjust the number of steps or length. So I could do it directly there. But if we have like this particular pattern and we've dragged it out into our project window, all right, you know, so we can resize the pattern and just kind of, you know, duplicate it and resize the pattern on the project window without having to convert it to MIDI. So just by grabbing kind of the right bottom edge. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see from theory, could you please give a brief explanation about what is the control room and how to set it up? All right, so the control room is going to be designed so that we could use, so we'll just open up this project here. All right, so a lot of times when we are working in a particular project, we may, what a lot of people end up doing is, let's say as we're kind of listening to our projects, let me adjust a setting here real quick. Just gonna go ahead and restart my Cubase here real quick. Yeah. Check my audio connections. All right. Give me just a second here. All right, so the control room, the kind of the design intention was to have kind of a separate monitoring path that's often kind of used on particular, like you see it on large format consoles. So we'll go ahead and just open up Cubase again here real quick. So many times when people will export a mix, they tend to use their particular audio master fader as in the mix as kind of their volume control, because often we're using powered speakers and people will use this as their monitoring volume. Now, as we use the monitoring volume, this, as we look at our master fader here, if my speakers are cranked up really loud, that may seem like really loud, but it's not. You know, our file, when we export it, is going to be pretty low in volume because this is actually attenuating the exported audio mixdown file. So what we want to do is to set up our control room so that we can just get rid of, and we'll go to your studio menu and we'll go to the audio connections and we'll activate the control room. Now we could set up multiple things in the control room, but the most important thing if you're just getting started is just to right click and to add a monitor. So I have a monitor set up and I have this set up for my HS7. Now when we do this, we want an output set up, but we want it set to not connected. And it seems unintuitive at first, but otherwise we're going to kind of doubly bus and have double the audio going out. So now I can come over here if I wanted to adjust the level of my monitoring volume. I could do that without affecting the gain structure of my master fader. So I could adjust this for the personal monitoring level, and I could decouple the monitoring level from the level of the master fader in the mix. So now I could just come over here now and adjust this without affecting the gain structure of the exported mix file. Now there's also going to be different down mix presets if I want to listen to it in mono versus stereo. And we could mute particular channels if we want to, especially useful in a 5.1. So, and this also gives us some different controls like the listen bus. So you may see this little L button, and with the listen bus, we could actually dim the listen amount. So if I wanted to solo a track, all the other tracks are muted, but if I wanted to hear that in context, I could hit the L button, and the other tracks can get dimmed down. So I could still hear the other tracks, so I could actually dim those down. If I have reverbs, that way I could isolate the reverbs by clicking on the listen. We could bring in other external sources. So if we have like a 2-track recorder or an iPad or an Amazon Echo device that we use to kind of call up reference mixes, if we have those connected into inputs of our audio interface, we can now just come right over here to the control room and we could have external inputs. So that way if the artist is like, oh, you know, can you play this track and let's compare it to mine, I could just come right over here and I'll say, okay, we're going to now switch to the external reference mode. So the control room also allows us to say, okay, I want to have, you know, plugins that are on. You know, so if I want to open up like my supervision plugin, I could see my metering plugins, or if I'm doing room correction plugins. So many times when people are doing room correction plugins, they're correcting the sound of the deficiency of their room through corrective EQs. So as we're doing corrective EQs, you may not want that room correction to be applied to the mix. So we could run the plugins just on the monitoring path that doesn't affect the exported audio from the mixdown session as well. So the control room gives us kind of a dedicated monitoring path. We could also set kind of known reference levels. So if you want to come over here and hold down the Alt or Option key, you can say we always want to have this as our reference volume wherever we're at. So we get to have really handy stuff like that. Or if you want to, you know, dim, you know, someone just calls you on the phone, or you want to listen to your mix at a low volume, like a predetermined volume, to make sure like vocals and snare are good, you could just hit the dim button. So it's kind of like an entire software monitoring section that is really unique to Steinberg solutions. Okay. All right, so theory, Suprayan just says, is there a way to reduce MIDI input latency, please? So latency is going to be determined by two different sources. So it's going to be determined by the number of plugins that you have in your system. So the plugins can cause latency, and the other thing that causes latency is the buffer size. So if you want to come over here, you could look at select your audio interface, make sure that you're running a lower buffer size. But if I go to add a MIDI plugin here, so let's say I have a groove agent, I'll open up just a virtual keyboard. So let's get this at the right octave. So you can see that now this is pretty responsive. So this is just running the latency of the system. But if we add a plugin that has a lot of latency, so we could come over here and let's say if I add like a vocal chain, and we could actually determine and see how much, so each vocal chain, since this is doing like 15 processes at once, we could actually kind of right click and we'll say, let's show section, we'll set up our sections. And one of them that we could have is the latency setting. So here we can see that now just adding those two plugins for real-time playback is generating 472 milliseconds of latency. So we'll consider that a tag. So now when I click here, we'll select this track, I click, we could have that latency. So one of the things you could do is make sure that you don't have kind of high latency plugins on, because that could add to the MIDI delay. And if you wanted to bypass plugins that have high latency, instead of going through kind of each particular track, what you could do is just come over and you could click on the constrained delay compensation, and that will disable high latency plugins so that we could have, more responsive virtual instrument and more responsive latency. So if I turn off that, we would now have kind of higher latency when working with that. So latency is caused by your buffer size, but also all of your plugins can be adding latency in through the system. And for a one button solution for high latency plugins, try activating the constrained delay compensation on the far left hand corner of the transport. Right. All right. Bratman Studio saying, people and Stella, please hit the like and thumbs up. All right, so we can see a question, how to audition a created beat pattern without playing the main timeline. So I think that the beat patterns are going to work in conjunction with the main pattern. So if we wanted to come over, let's add, let's say a drum track, we'll create a pattern event. So I think that the design intention is, we come over here, let's all right, and for this to be heard, so we go to the editor, there isn't like a separate play here, like an audition play. It's going to be set up so that as you play, this is playing in sync, so that we can come right over here. So when we do this, this is going to be following kind of the master transport so that you could hear it in context. So if you didn't want to hear it in context with anything and you want to kind of build up your track while it's playing, you could just move the cursor to outside of the song. But this is intended to, when we hit play, that this will play to keep everything kind of very simple, so that as you play, you could build a beat while the track is playing and just kind of build a small beat without having to copy all of the parts into the project window for it to play. All right, wonderful to see Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset, UK. All right, so we have Kurtrod says it's like a rocket scientist. All right, WarU303 says just popped in to say hi to Greg, Jazzy, and all the wonderful people make this happen. So grateful to y'all. Wish you all the best. Thanks for joining, and thanks for popping by. All right, so we see question in Cubase 14. What does the checkbox in Studio Setup use device WinRT MIDI do? I noticed that my MIDI hub comes up as a Windows MIDI with this unchecked. So I think that's generally going to be used. So when you come over here, I may not see it on. So when we go to so you may see different settings on this. So I think that's generally for the Bluetooth MIDI drivers. So check the Bluetooth MIDI. I think if you don't have a Bluetooth MIDI device, that you don't need to have that checked. So I think that enables you to have the Bluetooth MIDI. All right, Karem Ecker asks, how can I limit the chord pads to respond to only one MIDI device? All ARM channels are receiving input from the chord pads, even if I select only one MIDI device for chord pads. Okay. All right, so let's say I have Rhodes part, so all right, so this is selected. So all right, so I'll just have this play playing chords. All right, so if we come over here, so I'm not sure if it's the chord pads. So when we're dealing with chord pads, let me just. Let me see if this track has. Okay, so I'll just create a new project here real quick. Sorry about that. All right, so let's go ahead and just add an instrument track. We'll add 2 HALion Sonics. All right, so we have 2 different change this to different. All right, so we have kind of two different voices here, Rhodes, and let's say an organ. Okay, so now when I go to, let's say I play, it's right now it's going to be on the selected chord when we play with chord pads. So it's going to be on the selected track. So if they're both selected, now if I only want the organ to play as from my MIDI keyboard, I could go, right now my MIDI input port is set to all MIDI inputs. So if I switch this to my Panorama P4, now when we select both of them, since the chord pads themselves are an input, so we go to our MIDI input port, we'll see that we have all MIDI inputs, but the chord pads also show up. So if when I do this now, I select both tracks, since the organ is only set to specifically listen to MIDI from the controller and not all MIDI inputs. So you could specify that to have different inputs for that. But if you just select one particular track, now if we have a chord track, so it was the chord pads that were responding, but if we come over here and let's say we create a chord track, and we add different chords here, so let's say, okay, we'll do. So this is where if the instrument is set to, we could choose to use monitor tracks, or so now when we play the chords, we could come over. So let's go ahead and just monitor enable both of these tracks. So now the chords will play on both. So we could do that, or you could just choose, so let's say this is our Rhodes and this is organ. So we could choose to have it on all monitor tracks, or as we play, only to play back on a particular chord. So if it's the chord track, we could choose exactly which one is being used, or we could choose to have these set to use the monitor tracks. And then we could set the chord pads to specific inputs. So you can say, okay, here I want the Rhodes and I want only the chord pads to be the input. Now it's not going to play anything from the organ track. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay, so we see Best Green Jesus says, any way to reroute MIDI CC to show in my automation lane instead of being tied to the event MIDI. Arteria Analog records it to event, and I want lanes. Okay, so let's say let's convert some of my chords here. So let's we'll get some MIDI data. So we'll say, okay. All right, so if we want to, let's say now I want to record like MIDI CC 1, so I'll just come here and let me just check my MIDI record mode to merge. Okay, so I'll go ahead and record. Okay, so now I was moving my mod wheel. Let's see if it just, I'll just draw some in here. All right, so generally when we do this, we'll see our modulation data just kind of written into the part. And if we look at it here, we could see your modulation data. But I think if we go to let's go to the CC automations, or we select the event. Say that there's, one of the things you can do is go to your automation. You go to your CC automation setup. And now we could say when you record that you want to record like MIDI CC1 as an automation track. So here we could say our record destination, we want it to be an automation track. So now when we go to record automation data, so let me just record it in. All right. So you could just simply record. So go again to your CC automation setup and then just choose to go into the automation track. So you could do it just right there. And there's also, let's say if we have the existing parts, there's one other little trick, just trying to remember it. I thought it was in here. Let me just look at the functions. Oh, extract MIDI automation. So if I have my automation here, go to your MIDI menu to functions, extract MIDI automation, and then it will show up directly as your automation lane, so you can edit it as MIDI CC data. So if you already have the data, select the event, go to MIDI, to functions, extract MIDI automation. All right. Great to see you on, Best Green Jesus. All right. Wonderful to see Gerald Ely on from Martinez, California. Best Green Jesus from San Diego. All right. Great to see Jeff Sabelski from Chico, California, and Kerwin Young from Atlanta. Always wonderful to have Kerwin on, and everyone else. All right, 235 Studios asks, hey Greg, so clipping in the output bus but not in the channel bus indicates what? All right, so it could be, so let's say if we have, we'll come over. Let me just add an audio track. Make it stereo. So it could be just indicative that, you know, there's gain on the particular source, you know, or gain that's being added on the master bus, or, you know, the accumulation of multiple tracks being summed together, that there's gain there. So let's just take a look. I'll turn the control room volume down, and let's grab under the tools. We'll grab the test tone generator. So let's say on this now we have our level, and let's say we're going to be at minus 3 dB. Okay, so right now we just have an oscillator at 3 dB. I'll spare you listening to your oscillator test tone. All right, so we look at our mix console. You can see that we have minus 3 dB here, minus 3 dB there. So if I was to duplicate this track, and we can see that duplicating the track, because we've duplicated the track, we can add an additional 3 dB of gain. So, and also if we have EQ, if we have compression, we're running a limiter on our master bus, this could all affect the gain structure as well. So, you know, if we're attenuating, we could see that we could have the gain being adjusted, but, you know, just simply, you know, adding multiple tracks and summing multiple tracks can make, you know, gain adjustments in the master fader, and those gain adjustments, you know, could be clipping. So always be aware that, you know, as you add additional sources, those tracks could be clipping your master bus. Okay. All right, we see Kerwin Young says, "Hey everyone, I missed Greg's first day back on Tuesday. He's glad to catch up today." All right, so Balsa asks, "Hi, is it possible to click the track solo, record mute button, and hold and click and drag vertically over the tracks above or below to solo, record, mute those tracks in one click and drag?" So it's not, you know, if you, you know, so it's not necessarily click and drag. I've found that it's like not necessarily super accurate, but let's say I have multiple tracks here. You know, if I just select my tracks, you know, and okay, so I select the tracks, I hold down the shift key, and now I hit solo, or, you know, record, enable, or mute, that any of the selected parameters will, you know, just hitting S and M, and, you know, I think it's shift M for, you know, record, enable, so, you know, or monitor. So, you know, all the keyboard shortcuts work the same way. So if you just select the tracks and then just, you know, come over and use the keyboard shortcuts, you get the same functionality. So it may not feel as empowering to do it that way, but I think it's a more accurate approach. All right, Jeff Sabowski says, "I use a Behringer Monitor 2 for external monitor volume control with 3 separate on-off switches at a power amp. MR816 and master fader always stays the same in Cubase." That works as well. All right, Keys for Life asks, "Hi Greg, thanks for the pattern tip. For example, let's say there's a pattern 64 steps length and the last 16 steps being a snare roll. Can I use the same pattern only for the last 12 steps to drop in other place?" All right, so let's give it a try. So I'll just add a drum track. All right, so let's say okay, so let's go to, let's say we'll do 32 steps just for simplicity. So let's say I have all right, so let's say we just come over here. All right, so let's say if I drag this pattern now to my project. Okay, so we listen to this, and so let's say if I duplicate this, and now I'm going to drag the front handle here. So let's see. All right, let me make this a little larger so we could see it visually better. All right, so I'm going to switch my sizing mode, let's say, to moves contents. So it doesn't look like the pattern itself can be, but let's see if we just cut the pattern. It looks like it's always going to kind of start the pattern at the beginning. So it looks like it's always going to start the pattern from the beginning. So here we can see the pattern events here. So we have our kick snare, and we see our snare fill. And if I split here, we'll see that that will start. Let's see if I can, let me set it to my normal sizing. And it doesn't allow me to slip, so I would have to convert it to MIDI. And now if I convert to MIDI, yeah, so I would, it looks like you have to convert it to MIDI because it's going to play and kind of reference that entire pattern. So let's say if we convert it to MIDI, now I can come over and just take and duplicate just that that fill after. So I think you'd have to convert it to MIDI to do that. And if you wanted it to, let's say, be the same, what I would do is just duplicate the pattern version and convert this to MIDI, make my cut, and then let's say we duplicate this MIDI fill. Then I could always just go back to the original track version with the intact pattern, and I could have my MIDI version of it for more flexibility. All right, sorry, my chat and field just jumped. Find my spot. Okay, so Paul D asks, what do you think is a sweet spot in terms of cores/threads when it comes about to fight latency? So sometimes, like having a super fast processor versus a lower processor, lower speed processor, or lower threads, may not affect the latency as much. Like if you're doing just like a single element, where it could affect latency is when you're doing multiple tracks and how easy and allowing you to run larger projects at smaller buffers because there's more overhead processing room for the tracks to work with. I always tell, it's important to always think of getting the fastest kind of clock speed for a single processor. You'll get a lot of mileage out of that. So if I would err, if you had to scale and balance between more processing cores or a higher single core speed, I would probably go for a higher single core speed and get as many processing cores of the higher processing core speed. That would probably give you more longevity to work with. So wherever that falls in your budget, if you had to err on one side of maybe having two less cores, but a much faster processing speed per core, I would go for the faster processing speed per core. All right, Balsa asks, hi Greg, any reason why the drum machine has a big lag when working with my drum samples that are on SSD drive? No problem when working with Cubase default synthesized sounds and presets. Sometimes, like I haven't really noticed any particular lag. So if I come over here to the drum machine, everything is, pretty as expected. So let's say if I, want to, come over here, sometimes what happens with external drives, if it's like a USB powered external drive, like a lot of people use like the Samsung drives, which are great, beware that sometimes you may have a USB power management that is, that's set up to actually take your USB ports and kind of throttle down the speed of it to save battery life on a laptop device. So sometimes the USB ports may be in like an energy saving or eco mode to use less energy, and that could be a problem. But if you have, if you take the same samples to an internal drive versus the external drive, and you're like, oh, the internal is way more responsive than the external, then I would look at like USB power management. And it could be something that you just enable, or if you're connecting it to a hub, make sure it's a powered hub. And you can get USB hubs that have a lot of power specifically for that reason, so it's not relying on power from the USB bus as much. All right. All right, so we see Recyclop joining from Finland. We see Theory, Suprian just says many thanks for all the help provided. You're the best. So always glad to help and be a part of the community. We have Mabita Jr. joining from Kenya. Thanks for joining this evening. All right. All right, so we see, hi Greg, can I send a backbone synthesized sound to drum machine and continue to synthesize it if needed using the drum machine? So the drum machine and backbone are using kind of two different engines. You could, render the output of a, of a drum sample from, from the backbone and then do additional sample processing and editing, but it's not a continuation, where you just say, okay, now I want to take my backbone and I need to finish it and do all of the processing in the drum machine. They're two separate instruments. So while you could render a file in Backbone and load that into the drum machine and drop it onto a pad and do further processing, it's not going to be kind of a true synthesis between the two. So they're kind of not related in that way. All right, Anton asks a question. Can you explain direct routing? In which situations is it needed? All right, so if direct routing just allows us to, route audio to different devices. So sometimes, we have people that will be utilizing an entire project, and maybe they're using all of their 8 aux sends, and they want to send tracks to groups. So the direct routing is great for that, or you want to actually kind of print alternative mixes. So we'll show you the direct routing here. So I'm going to, let's say we have, we'll go to our mix console, and I want to add, and for parallel processing, it's often used. So let's say I want to add, let's say 4 group tracks. Okay, so now when we go to our mix console here, we could just see, okay, let's go to our direct routing. So I want to take all of my drums tracks here. And one of the things that we could do is actually just kind of come right over here to the settings, and we can say direct routing summing mode equals on. So if I now want to send all of my audio to group 1, and let's say I'm going to, let's put on Q-Link. So I'm going to take the selected tracks, send them all to group 1. I'm going to turn it on. And then I want also to send these to group 2 and turn these on. And let's send it to group 3. So now I could take all of my drums, and these could all be routed to our different folders, so we could do different parallel processing on them. Now, what else is interesting is the direct routing can be actually automated. So if you wanted to use this, so instead of using an aux, using a send, like if we're using our sends for, multiple effects paths within a mix, and I wanted to take my tracks and route them to multiple parallel sources, we could do that utilizing the direct routing. Now, sometimes if people have a hearback system, which is like a hardware monitoring system for studio use, where you kind of use like an Ethernet connection, but you need to take like all of the tracks and send it into the hearback system. You could now use direct routing for that. So this way all the tracks can be going to an alternate monitoring path, a parallel monitoring path, a parallel headphone distribution path without having to use any of the sends. So in situations where you want to, have parallel processing and you don't have the need to set how much of the blend between the dry and process sound is set, direct routing can make a big difference for that. So very complex parallel processing, direct routing is a great way to go. All right. So we see from 235 Studios, and I see discussion between him and Jazz Dude about Serum with high output. So if you want to send a report, to, Jazz Dude isn't officially associated with Steinberg or Yamaha, but if you want to send a report to me at clubcubase at steinberg.de, I'd be happy to kind of check it out. I don't have a license of Serum, but if you find that sometimes some instruments can run hot, so their output level. All right, Balsa asks, hi Greg, how can I print to MIDI notes the chord pads playing style pattern presets? Okay, so let's come over here and let me just jump to. All right, so say. All right, so let's say we have our instrument here, let's say chord pads, and let's say if we want to now, let's go to a pattern, we'll come over here, let's get to, let's say, groovy chords. Fine. All right, so if we want to print this, all you would have to do is just come over and place Cubase into record. So let's come over here. And now it's, so once you place Cubase in record, then the chord pads, the different chord patterns will automatically be printed. So if we were to look at this, we can see that the patterns have now just been directly recorded into the project window. So just place it in record, and then when you have the sections, like the patterns for the chord pads, it will then record those patterns directly to the project window. All right, so we see from Balsa asks, hi Greg, in sampler track, can the slice samples play overlapping each other instead of cutting, choking each other when the notes overlap to hear the slice in its entirety? So I don't think that the sampler track does that. So let's say if we want to just open up a project. I think I may have something that may work with that. So I think it's really kind of intended to, cut off the sample, but let's see if there's a setting. I know we could do it in Groove Agent. Okay.
No time to hesitate.
All right, so let's say I have.
Let's spin. You wanna spin.
So I think now, look. So if we have.
Let's spin. You wanna.
So I think it's automatically going to play that. It's going to cut that off.
You wanna done.
That it automatically cuts it off. But if we, and let me just check. I believe that's how the sampler track is going to work. Let me just check, see if there's, I don't think, but if we take this and let's say we go and we have it all set up in inside of the sampler track, we could take it to Groove Agent SE. And as we do this, we could choose to switch the playback mode, let's say for all of these instruments. And if we come over here to, let's see, where's that? Is it? But I think if we could set it, let me just, that we could set it to play to the end of the sample. Let me see if I could. But this may be dealing with the slices. So let's see if we can, if we have this.
No. Time. No.
But I think maybe with the sliced audio, it's not going to, it may not extend it, but I know if we have other samples, let me see if I could just go to the main sample here.
No.
Yeah, I think if it's sliced, it may not play back the original sample. But let me just see if I could. And let me just add another Groove Agent and see if it's different with it's not sliced. So there's like kind of a one-shot mode. Let me see if I could find it real quick. So that may not be in. Yeah, so let's see if we turn off yeah, so if it was just a normal sample, we could turn off, we could switch the mode here. But okay, let's see if we could. All right, so in Groove Agent, if we come here, you could just say, switch it to one shot.
No.
But yeah, it's not going to, if you switch it to one shot, it's not going to do it for the sliced audio. So the sliced audio, it's not going to allow you to kind of work in one shot mode. So you'd have to,
No.
so it's going to cut off when you play the next voice. I think it's pretty common for most sliced stuff. Sorry about that. All right. See, Jazz Dude says, thanks, Greg, for not torturing me with 1K. I remember I had to record 1K test tones at Mark Knopfler's studio for 3 hours. So anytime I hear 1K test tone, I think of London. So, all right, great to see George checking in from Germany. So Karam Ecker just says, thanks, Greg. My keyboard is set to trigger piano, my machine to drums. However, when I play my keyboard, it triggers the drums as well. When chord pads is open, even if I limit the MIDI input of the chord pads. Yeah, I'll see if I can get that set up. I only have one keyboard set up, but if you're, see if you use and I think, if you're using the dedicated MIDI ports, instead of all MIDI inputs. And then I think also something else that you may try is if you go to your studio setup, and let's say we go to the MIDI port setup. Let's see if the chord pads shows up in here. Doesn't look like it. I was just seeing if it showed up within the chord within there to disable it from in all MIDI inputs. Okay. All right. So we have a question. Am I right in thinking that the vocal chain plugin is intended to be used as an insert effects only and not ascend effects? You could definitely use it as ascend effects. I think most people would, you could use it either way. I think most people would use it for vocal processing, but it's not limited to vocal processing. But when you're dealing with a lot of, the compressors, EQs, but there's also, those are generally run as inserts, but also it has, pitch correction, reverbs, delays built in as well. So you could definitely run it either way. Hi, Greg. Any insider knowledge on drum machine preset names? Are there some that directly emulate Lindrum, Roland 808, etc.? So I don't think anything that's I don't think it's intended to be derivative of other drum machines. So I don't think you could. Sometimes you may get a little hint from a name. But it's intended to be its own drum machine with its own sounds that people use, and not just be limited to, trying to get sounds from 40 years ago in instruments. So, and it's always a very interesting topic of discussion for different designers. Like the dilemma of naming all of your patches, all of your presets that you've made. So. All right, so we have a question. Greg, can you please quickly explain the knobs in the control room? With new designs, it looks a little different. Thanks. Okay. So, yeah, the control room kind of got a makeover, like a GUI makeover within Cubase 14. So a lot of it will now have kind of more of modern... where we could scroll within our different settings, so we could, scroll vertically within our particular within the different windows. Some of the functions, I think most of the functions are pretty similar. So if you want to see your inserts, we could go to your main or select your inserts tab. Some of it may get kind of more consistent user interface developments. We could see kind of the levels. Probably before were quite hidden. So when you look here, we can see kind of the click volume. When we do talkback, the talkback volume. But when we go to like the monitoring, we could switch between your different monitors in the that are defined in your control room, your down mix presets. These are all, but I think it's mostly kind of the interaction. But if we could see kind of the, activate the click track, activate the listen bus. We have kind of more obvious, when we look at this, we're setting our reference level to dim. If we wanted to switch between our different speakers, we could do that. And, this section was often hidden for people. They would have to click on the main tab here to get that. So even when this is kind of tucked away, it's still like, oh, levels for what? Then you could expose that without having to expand the vertical height of the main tab as we had to previously. That was probably a bit too subtle for a lot of people to find. But let me know if there's any specific buttons that you see that you don't understand the function of. All right, JVI just says, hi Greg and Club Cubase family, just popping in to say thank you for these great streams. Can't stick around, but I will watch the stream tomorrow. So thanks for popping in. All right. All right, Joystick Jutsu asks, can you use Bezier curves in note expression? I don't think it's set up for that. I think a lot of the note expression is kind of really intended for, capturing the live performance. So let's say if we come over here and let me just change the setting here. All right, let me just... make sure I have it visible. Okay. All right, so now we double click. So these tools are still, I don't think that we could do the Bezier curves here, but we can draw in if you wanted to adjust, but we can't necessarily. So if you select different drawing tools, you could draw in with those particular tools, but you may not be able to kind of adjust the arc of kind of how the Bezier tools will allow you to work with. So if we want to grab our parabola and then so you could kind of draw in with the different tools, but it's not really set up yet to adjust the curves, the Bezier curve. I'll pass that along. All right, so you see DigiBeats Music just says, can you please demonstrate how to apply ducking for reverbs and effects on tracks? So yeah, let's take a look at it. So okay, so let's come over. Let's say we have the guitar. Let me just take some processing off here. Here, I'll just grab these. Let's copy. Okay, so let's say we have.
You looked my way and your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you called me to.
All right, so let's try the modulation, the modulator's approach to this. All right, so let's say we want to kind of duck the reverb on a guitar. So let's come over and let me just kill all the processing here. Let me just do the same here. All right.
We'll leave it now.
So I want to add, let's say, an effect. I'm going to add a reverb to the guitar. And let's make it like a shimmer reverb. Why not? All right, so now.
I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
So the high frequencies there. All right, so let's go ahead and see if we could use the modulators for this. So let's come up, and I want to take on this track, let's do an envelope follower. Okay. And we want to set the parameter here to our reverb output. Okay, I'll just do this as an insert here quick. Instead. Okay. All right, so let's. Okay, so now we want to set up the vocal as kind of the side chain.
The day we first met, that was a long, long time ago. It was 7th grade.
And let's make sure that we have.
School parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through.
All right, let me just take this and we'll make sure we're sending a lot of signal in to the modulator. So let's come over here to send. All right.
You caught my breath while you called me to. So in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
So you could kind of come over here and choose to modulate the particular using the envelope follower. So that way you could actually just take this as a side, basically side chaining this to then adjust the reverb output level. So then that would automatically control the reverb output level. So you could try approaches like that as well. All right. All right. Wonderful to see Dwight Cunningham checking in from the Bahamas. All right, wonderful to see Steve McRae on. It says just moved over to Mac M4 and he's very happy. All right, Dwight Cunningham just says, Greg, I installed Cubase 14 on my new computer. I'm having issues with HALion Sonic as regards to accessing it. So make sure, like a lot of times people may install Cubase, but if we come over, let's say if we open up the download assistant, so make sure that when you utilize the download assistant, that you're actually at that point that you installed all of the content. So sometimes people will just install Cubase, and maybe there's often people will tend not to install all the different content, especially if you move to a new machine. So make sure that all of these different aspects, like your HALion Sonic, all of the HALion Sonic selection content, that all of those have been installed as well. And that should all be working on your Cubase 14 license. So sometimes people install Cubase 14 and not all of these content and instruments and samples. So you paid for all of these. It's all available in your license. So just make sure in the Steinberg download assistant that they're all available to access. All right, so we see Steve McGray Music says, question in VariAudio, when I click on note, the volume is very quiet compared to playing the audio. How do you change the volume of the individual notes while editing in VariAudio? All right, so let's say we want to take, we'll come here, we have our VariAudio, I'm going to activate it. All right, so when we click on a note, let's come over here. Let me just make sure I have it's going to be based on like your preview volume. So I think, or your control room volume here. So if I just come here and adjust the control room volume, then that will set the level
my way
of the preview volume.
my way.
So if this is set lower, then the preview volume will also be set lower. So now,
My way.
so try just adjusting the control room volume. And it's great to see you on the live stream, Steve. All right, so Dwight Cunningham just says, Greg also knows that the App Store payment is required for the FX app for Cubase 3. I purchased a few days ago. So yeah, there's different models for stuff that's on the Apple or Google Play stores as well. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, David M says, Greg, that cursor assign tip was so helpful. I set it up now. That simple alteration really speeds up my workflow. It's what I had in Adobe Audition, so it was frustrating me, so thanks a lot. All right, you see Uno Momento wants people to whack the like button. All right, so we see from George says, but if I use the vocal chain as an effect sends, I can't see any global wet dry control as a send effect. So you'd want to get any of the dry signal to come through. So like if we are using it as an effects chain, so again, I think most people would tend to run it as an insert, but if we wanted to run it as a effects send, so we come over here, let's set our vocal chain. All right, so as we come over here, let's say to the imager, we could have kind of the send here. We could adjust how much of the send and the amount of the reverb. But again, I think that most people would tend to utilize this as an insert, and you have the ability to send the amount of, how much is being sent internally within this. So while you can run it, obviously, as a send effect, I think most people it's more practical to run it as an insert. All right, Cycling is Awesome asks, hi Greg, could you please explain how I can have a drum beat I made in Groove Agent on different tracks so I can treat snare, bass drum separately? Thanks. Okay, so let's come over here. All right, so let's say, all right, I'll just do a new project here real quick and just load up quick. All right, so let's say I want to come here. Let's program a quick pattern. All right, let me just... All right, so now we'll take this pattern here. So let's say, we just put this in. All right, so it could depend on if we're running Groove Agent as, so we have 32 stereo out, so now everything is going out of, if it's an acoustic agent kit, I can come here to the mixer and say, okay, I want my kick going out of output 3 and my snare out of output 4. So now when I go to my mixer, we will see additional outputs. Let me just hide my input channels. So if I want to now, let's say, add an effects channel. So let's say we'll add when I go to this channel, we'll just say, okay, let's go to my sends. And I want this to be RoomWorks. So inside of an acoustic agent kit, you go to the mixer and you could set up to your 32 stereo outs. And it's handled a little bit differently if it is in a beat agent kit. So with the beat agent kit, what we would do is a slightly different approach. So beat agent kit, when you select the pad itself, you see your 32 stereo outs here. So this way, kick could get processed and sent to output 2, snare, output 3. So now I could apply a channel EQ just to the snare. Let's add reverb just to the snare and not the kick. And I want to now EQ the kick. So in Groove Agent SE, you would select the pad, and on the edit, you would see the output bus. On an acoustic agent kit, you would see in the mixer of the acoustic agent kit, once it's opened up, in the mixer at the top of the fader, that's where you set the outputs there. Okay, Tony Tronzo asks, Greg, when I double-click a MIDI file and I'm in a key editor in full screen and I go to the transport and press the play button, the key editor goes back to the lower zone. Can it stay in full screen? All right, so let's take a look. All right, so let's say I have this particular, let me just duplicate this bunch of times. Okay, I'm going to come over. Let's glue all these parts. All right, so now I'm going to open up the key editor. So we do full screen. So now, let's say I go to the beginning of the project, I hit play. I'll take off the loop. So it seems, just make sure, this is when I press the play button, the key editor goes back to the lower zone, can stay. So yeah, I'm not sure if you're pressing the play button on the transport, but if I'm just hitting the space bar, and that's kind of playing as expected. So I'm not sure if you hit F2, you can generally open up the transport panel. But see, so right now, you know, when I use this space bar, it's kind of just playing as expected. So let me know if you hit the space bar if that works. But it's not automatically, you know, so if this is in full screen, let's say if I now shrink this a little bit so we see our transport, we just resize this. So, you know, and I believe that if we right click here, we could also see the transport palette. So let's see if we but try to see if you get the behavior to work, like hitting the space bar, which I think most people do. All right, so you see from Dwight Cunningham, Greg, I thought the DSP Mix FX for UR series was a free app as regards to mixing my iPad to record with my UR242 interface. So I think it's free. Let me see if I could see from the Apple App Store. I usually don't buy anything from there. Let's see if we could find it on here. It might have to. I don't have an iOS device really. So I will check, Dwight, if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. I have an iPad, but my son took it up to his room. But I'm not sure. I think it would be. I'm not sure if it's paid or not. I would be inclined to think that it's not, but I'm not absolutely positive. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, or I'll make a note to look into it for Tuesday's live stream. But it should be maybe listed as, I'll scroll back. So check to see if it's the DSP Mix Effects app or just the Effects app. You can see if it's the DSP Mix Effects app. All right. All right, we see Gareth has to take off, so thanks for joining us today. All right, Anton Boyko asked question, how to disable a warning message in the middle of a screen when you open a track and VariAudio is starting to redact it. The algorithm has been changed. So I think it might be a preference. Let's take a quick look. So let's say if we go to VariAudio, I think if you check inhibit warning when changing sample data, so try turning both of those on and see if that helps. All right, so we have Alan from Scotland asks, today when working on a project, I add the new HALion sonic instrument called Hot and select Hot Brass as the instrument. So when I select Hot Brass Split, the system just locks up. Any reasons why? So I'm not sure if that's a standard sound that comes with Cubase, or if you have HALion, or if you bought the HALion Select. But I don't think it's a standard Cubase sound, but let's take a look and see if we come here. So I'll go to HALion Sonic. And then we'll go to Hot Brass, and let me just get the Hot Brass Split. So, let me know if you, because I think it's a HALion Sonic selection content. But I think, like, if you had HALion, this comes with it, or it might be an additional purchase. But I don't think that this is a standard instrument that comes with Cubase. I could be mistaken, but let me know if you have purchased one of the other HALion licenses where maybe that instrument comes with it, but it seems to be kind of working for me as expected. All right, we see Tim K's older brother is a Cubase 13 Pro user. That's great. All right, we see Gerald Ely checking out. Thanks for the kind words. All right, we had a couple questions that were mailed in, so let me get to those. All right, so we had a question, how to do triplets and polyrhythms in the pattern editor. All right. Okay, so just load up Kit here. Okay, so let's say we want to work within the pattern editor. So let's say we want to maybe work with 16 pulses. We're going to do, probably a 1 measure pattern. So when we do this, we could just come over and say, okay, we want to all right, so let's say now I just want to put in some closed hi-hats. And say I'll actually put it in the right row this time. All right, and so I want to do just some velocity variation here. All right, now let's say we want to do like triplets or quintuplets. So what we could do is just come over here and we could choose to say, okay, I want to put in like maybe some bongos, and instead of 16th notes, now we could say I want to put in 8th note triplets. And now I could see the grid just automatically change here. Now, if I wanted these triplets to be spread across all the different tracks, we could just say, okay, when I did this, we noticed that it changed to 12. So it automatically kind of switched to change that. But if I wanted to have more triplets, or let's say I want to do claves, and I wanted to make this, like a completely different, I want to change the number of steps. So I could say, let's make this, let's make it 5 steps. So even though this is now set up for 5 steps, it's playing the 5 steps in time with the other steps. So let's say I want to put in a shaker, and I want parts of the shaker to be 30-second notes. So now I could just come over here and just put in So we could just kind of take our different divisions and be able to put in triplets and have it automatically adjust to, so if I switch this now to 16th note triplets, we now have 24 cells to kind of enter in. If I switch this now to 8th note triplets, so this way we could have like all sorts of different polyrhythms, and we could also say I want this to play back alternating between forward and reverse. So different rows can be playing in different directions as well. So all sorts of great stuff that you could do with polyrhythms that was, it's very hard to do in a lot of sequencing applications, but now it's pretty effortless using the drum editor, the new pattern editor in Cubase. All right, next question was how to do ramps for tempo. So when we add a tempo track, so we could come right over here. When we see this, a lot of times we look at the tempo And we can say, okay, I'm here, and I'm, sometimes you may see that when we're putting in different tempo values, that there's two different modes, and you may have to kind of extend this over until you actually see until a node is selected. So right now it's set to step. So if I go to grab my pencil tool, I could just immediately go to different tempo values. Now if I switch this to ramp, then I could just gradually go from this tempo to that tempo, and it will interpolate the different tempo changes between those 2 points to have smooth tempo values. So we could just kind of come right over here and switch between step or ramp. And if you're doing this in the tempo editor, we would kind of see the same control. So if you hit control or command plus the letter T, here we could see the tempo editor, and we could switch between step and ramp as necessary. So if we have it set to automatic, it would just automatically keep the same value until it's changed. So now if I'm on ramp and I switch it to automatic, it would automatically just ramp those values. So if you don't see it, and if you select a node, you can see it from the info line, but if you don't see it initially, just kind of extend the controls over to the right a little. You can extend the controls over to the right a bit. All right. All right, so we have another question. Says, hello, Greg. I was wondering if you could share your opinion on a Cubase stream about my ideas for Cubase 15 I present in this video. So I didn't get a chance to watch the video before the live stream, but I think it says, to get the full picture reasoning for why I'd want this, you should check out the full video. But if you don't have time, here are the changes I'd like to see. One is channel remembrance. A new alternative when creating a workspace to decide whether you want that workspace to remember the channel selection or not. So I can see where that could be useful. I'll pass all these along as I do all feature requests. And second feature request will be workspace settings in preferences, being able to, inside of Cubase preferences, to program whether you want the global or project workspaces to be checked in by default when creating a new workspace. Also, if the channel remembrance is added, that to unselected inside the settings if you want to have the new channel remembrance be checked by default. So I think, as you're doing it, my personal thoughts on this would be that I would always want the option, not as a global option, but I think like on my personal studio, I have global workspaces set up. So my mixer, my control room can be set up, in any project that I want. And then I have, like if I'm doing vocal tuning on a project, I may have like the entire VariAudio window set up. But if I'm not doing vocal tuning, then I may not need particular windows. So I think it's, I'm not sure if I would want, and I haven't seen the video, but I'm not sure if I would want it always to be going to a project workspace that's dedicated to a project and may have different aspects that are unique, or a global workspace. I think I would want the ability to make that decision as I'm working within the project. But I'll pass it along. And 3, the name field active by default. It says when creating a workspace currently, you have to click the mouse to name it. Why not have it be active right away? This means less mouse work. So we go to workspaces. We'll say, let's go to add a workspace. Yeah, so I'll pass that along that could be active, so you don't have to click in the field. All right. See more dedicated key commands for workspaces beyond 10 and upward. Simple, I would like the idea to be able to add a specific key command for Workspace 10 and up, not having to search for it, but still want the search function to remain as well. So I can see where that's helpful. And the fifth request would be name search for Workspace X and up. This is a no-brainer to me. Make it so you can search for Workspace name instead of, or as an alternative to the number of Workspace. Much easier to remember and find a specific Workspace. So I guess one thing that might be interesting is if you could actually access Workspaces from within Media Bay, if that would make sense. If you're working with large numbers of Workspaces. So if you could let me know, I think this is from Vincent, if that was an available option in Media Bay, if that's something that you would use so that you could manage multiple Workspaces and save them almost like Workspace presets in a way, drag and drop to, so. But I'll watch the video and make sure to pass these along. And Steinberg reads all the different indexes. All right. Let me just jump back to our live questions. All right. You see Anton in Rock Trust Boyko says, it worked, inhibit warning in settings. Thanks again, 10 years of suffering. So let's see, just a couple minutes on a Club Cubase live stream and you're all set. All right, you see Gerald Ely is checking out. Says, thanks for all you do, Greg. Great stream. Have a great weekend. I wish the same for the Cubase community. All right. All right, Jazz Dude says, Euclidean for the win. All right, Tim K just says, that's very cool. One of the things I like about certain ancient drum machines was the ability to select multiple rhythms simultaneously, combining 3/4 with 4/4, etc. for fun. Could recreate here. All right, so we have Plentien, Siabanga, Makahoba, just saying hello, Greg, and hello to all the fellow Cubase users. All right, so we have a question from Benny. It just says, when I use tempo detection, I can change the BPM on the track, but the click doesn't keep up. It lives its own life. Cubase 14 Pro. All right, so let's take a look. I'll just do... All right, so let's come over here. I'll do a quick, let me just get the right sample rate. All right, so I turn on my click track here. So you select the event. Let's do our tempo detection. All right, so we see, it says, when I use a tempo detection, I can change the BPM on the track, but the click doesn't keep up. It lives in its own life. Cubase 14 Pro. All right, so we did our tempo detection. All right, so one of the things that we want to do now that, let's say we have our track. All right, so let's say if we change the BPM on the track, the click doesn't keep up. All right, so I'm not sure if, so let's say if I change the BPM here, all right, so it's not gonna probably affect. All right, so we just changed the tempo. We changed the tempo, but we didn't really, while we extracted the tempo from the audio file, we didn't give it, we didn't take this metadata that's in the file and apply this intelligence to as metadata in the file. So to do that, we come over here to Audio to Advanced. And we do our set definition from tempo. And as we do that, so now as I work on this and I just turn off the tempo track, I go to 144. Now it's playing back a steady tempo, but the audio itself is kind of has a correlation with it. Or if I take the tempo here and ramp it down, now it's because we have that correlation of what the tempo is of the audio file embedded as the metadata. So now we can be much more accurate and have that correlation. We'll go back to the original tempo. Or if I wanted to take this part of the solo, speed it up. And then back to the original tempo again. So let me know if, so it could be if it's kind of lost its correlation between the audio file when you change it and you want the file to react. Try to select the event, go to Audio, Advanced, and choose Set Definition from Tempo. All right. You see FlyV just says, thanks for all your time and the live stream, Greg, plus Jazzy. Until next time, he's got all his notes to review. Okay, so Benny just says, okay, Greg, thanks. I'll try again. All right, I saw a comment from Jazz Dude about Euclidean for the win. So if you're not familiar with Euclidean functions, this is like a cool thing for the drum editor. So we'll go ahead and take a look at it. So let's come over and add our drum track again. Okay, so now when we go to the editor, let's say, so if we put this in Euclidean, there's kind of like, drum intelligence with this. So let's say I'm on my kick pad, I'm on a kick drum here. And what we're able to do is as we just kind of start to move the knob over, we kind of add in our audio. So let's say I'll come here. And I move it. So it'll just kind of in more musical manners add kind of, different patterns, but more complexity as we move it over to the right. So we can say, okay, I just want to do like a 4 and a 4. I want to come to the snare. And at this point, we could just say, okay, let's And when we now want to go to, let's say, our closed hi-hat, we could just come over and go from like quarter notes to incorporating some eighth notes, more straight eighths, more straight sixteenths. And then we also have the ability of working in kind of Euclidean, which is kind of more musically oriented, or if we wanted it to be completely random on the hi-hats, I could just come here. So let's say I want it to be more Euclidean, but I wanted to introduce like bongos, and let's go ahead and randomize the bongos here. So we'll go to randomization, roll the dice, and let's roll the dice on the other bongos, and we could just again come over so all sorts of great stuff that you could do, and also with like play probability. So you can say, okay, like play these notes like 30 to 40% of the time. So it won't necessarily play the hi-hats every single time, but it'll just randomly within this percentage play the different type of hi-hats. So you could come up with all sorts of very creative stuff using kind of randomness, and you could have randomness for kicks and snare patterns, randomness for hi-hats, or just, you know, Euclidean, where it's going to be a little more intentional with different levels of complexity. So all right, okay, let's see, I think we are reached the end of questions. We'll see if there's any more questions. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions, and if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button, and we'll see if there's any questions. I know there's usually maybe about 20 seconds from when I talk to when you guys hear. See if any other questions kind of come up. I want to thank everyone for creating such a wonderful community for the Steinberg community. We see Sable Winters on. Everyone say hi to Sable. She's in the Bay Area in California. All right, so we see from Joystick, Jutsu, is it possible to do FM synthesis in Retrolog? So Retrolog is going to do like virtual analog. But, you know, we do have FM Lab, which would run inside of, it comes with HALion or is available as a HALion sonic instrument. So if we come over here, we go to an instrument track and come over. So we could think of, you know, HALion Sonic is kind of the playback engine, but if we wanted to come over, there is, and we did this in conjunction with Yamaha because we're in the Yamaha family, but if you go to FM Lab, kind of all of your FM synthesis capabilities are here. So we could think of HALion as not only virtual analog, you know, wavetable, granular, you know, FM. It's going to be organ oscillators and sampling, you know, so just so many different forms of synthesis. So this is going to be found within the HALion family, and you could import all of your SysX data from DX7s as well. So if you want to just kind of, so while it's not in Retrolog, Retrolog is going to be a virtual analog synthesizer, but if you wanted like a really, you know, full-featured FM synthesizer, you know, you could buy FM Lab separately. We see also in our question, it'd be really cool if Retrolog's envelopes and LFOs looked like the new modulators and had visual feedback while controlling knobs. Yep, you know, so I think most synthesizers don't react to internal LFOs, But, obviously if you wanted to do kind of the same thing using the modulators in Cubase 14, those options are available for you, where you could see the visual representation. All right, so see Artist Knows Love says, wishing everyone to be safe. All right. I see a question from Sable of says, what is Spectral? So I'm not sure. All right, we see Joystick Jutsu just says, mind blown. Thanks, Greg. My gosh, Cubase is the best. And what's really great about this is once you start getting into, you have, wonderful arpeggiator, but you can now, get into each of the operators. So when you go to your voice, you have your LFO. And if you wanted to go into step modulation, so you can come over here, all sorts of amazing kind of FM synthesis functionality. So check that out. It's a good one to play around with. So if you wanted to get into your operators and your oscillators, all right here. So all right, we see from Kerwin Young just says, thanks, Greg. Everyone have a great weekend. So see if I'll give a last call for questions. If not, we'll wrap up about 10 minutes early. Again, thanks for, all right, wonderful to see Graham Witcher checking in from Oxford, formerly Royal Wootton Bassett, which is my favorite town to say. All right, so it looks like we are out of questions. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. And I appreciate everyone for just, again, creating. Yeah, and see Jazz Dudes just asking if people have seen Dorco 6. Yeah, check that out. I think the proofreading features are just like so wonderful with that. Yeah, so check out Dorco 6. The team is on fire. So, but with that, we will go ahead and wrap up the live stream today. We'll be back on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. I want everyone to please stay safe and healthy, and we will see you on Tuesday. Everyone have a great weekend, and goodbye.